So when I speak about a certain person and the things they have said, that person will be speaking, I will be speaking about that particular instance and not generalizing to all examples of that person, even if that person's opinion is itself a racist opinion. So I just want to be very, very clear about this. And I expect everyone who is in the chat and everyone who leaves a comment to be courteous, respectful, and themselves understand that this is a difficult conversation that has to be had, and the best way to have difficult conversations are maturely and with empathy. And I think that is the best way for us to approach this. So, I think that there are some very hard truths that have been revealed by the Epstein files that are very difficult to talk about. They're especially difficult for the mainstream liberal types to talk about because they reveal a lot of what happens behind the scenes.
Ladies as well.
We have our polite fictions in the foreground that we all deal with, and then there are the realities of the thing behind the scenes. And one of the strangest things about all of this is how well, not even how well connected Epstein was, but how intrinsic and how instrumental he was to arranging massive international business deals. Now,
yeah, the guy was no joke. I mean, he was a kind of a boss.
Has been very strange for a lot of people, but actually it makes a lot of sense.
To say the least.
Because when you're dealing in such large numbers with such vast distances between very disparate kinds of people, you need networks of trust. And networks of trust are not just formed out of nothing. They're built on something. And they can be built in many, many different ways. But basically you need people that you know you can rely on and who will be able to facilitate the things that you want done. Because a lot of people have the impression that Epstein is using the disgusting and horrific things that he did for personal gain. And the fact of the matter is, not really. Epstein is a fixer, or was a fixer, or maybe he still is a fixer, who knows, right? Epstein was a
lot
of
people think he's still alive.
He was a go-between. He was a contact man. He was a man that connected very important people to other very important people who were in different networks. And now these networks are the things that truly rule the world. And they're not just made up of one kind of person. They're not just made up of one class of person, frankly. Or any one ethnicity or anything like this. They're very, very complex. And they are...
You guys can see in the background.
No one
show,
network
so
is
as soon
in
as
full
it comes
control
on,
of any of
I'll
the
swap.
systems. And so you do get, when someone has pushed the boundaries further than the other networks will tolerate, they are the fall guy. We're currently seeing this with Peter Mandelson, right? We're currently seeing it. He's resigned from the Labour Party. He's resigned his lordship, so he's no longer a lord. And an investigation has been opened into him because he sent Epstein privileged information about €500 billion worth of bailout.
I think he cost them a lot of money.
I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. He sent that straight to Epstein the second he found out about it. Why would he do that? Well, it's because Epstein is an important node in a network for someone else. And this information was given to him because it's friendships that keep these networks together, as well as mutual self-interest. And in many cases, it'll be mutual self-destruction if this is leaked.
It's a good old boys network.
The other networks and laws and powerful actors in play, they have, in a way, kind of checks and balances. There is a certain level of excess you can't go beyond. But we'll talk about the kind of people that become fixers in a minute. But Ferris has got a point here, right? So the reason, I mean, there are multiple networks, right? And he says Rubio is owned by Ellison, Vance is owned by Thiel, and Trump is owned by Adelson. Now, I don't know how accurate owned by is, but the point that he's making is there are lots of big networks of these, and massive tech companies are often at are instrumental in these, because this is where power and money is.
And it kind of sucks that this is just accepted, that our politicians are owned by one person or another, or one group or another. Like, it's
Any
crazy.
node of power and money, and the people who control that become the essentially sovereigns of these networks. And to get things done, they need fixers. They need people who do things. Now, the question then is, okay, well, what network was Epstein a part of? Well, he actually tells us in the Epstein
Israeli.
files. So, as you can see here, with him corresponding with Peter Thiel in 2016, he says, as you probably know, I represent the Rothschilds. Now, this is, of course, a particular ethnic banking network that he's a part of. There's also JP Morgan.
I mean, yeah, it is.
There's a couple of others that he is also involved with. And so he is an agent of that particular power network. And it interfaces with other power networks. Here we are emailing Peter Thiel, who is, again, part of another kind of power network. And this, I mean, this is just on the justice.gov Epstein Files website, right? This is literally from the Epstein Files website. I've got it up here. And this is just the nature of these networks interfacing. They have, in each side, their reliable men, and their reliable men introduce one another and connect so-and-so to so-and-so. I mean, we covered on the podcast in Ferris's segment where Epstein had a particularly irreverent way of doing this, where he'd just say, Mike, John, Mike, right, we're introduced, and let's get on with business. And he would be connecting like the Qataris with someone else in order to create a port in the Congo, or someone wants to like meet Vladimir Putin, and so Epstein is the middleman between that. And at the moment, the British media is desperately trying to portray Epstein as Vladimir Putin's man, but that's not true. I mean, it's not like Putin isn't mentioned plenty of times in this, but he isn't part of Epstein's network. Epstein has told us the network that he is a part of, and he's explicit about it. And so you see, right, okay, there is this particular network which has an ethnic dimension, and you can all work out what that dimension is. And I really want to be clear. This is not a universal inclusion in the network. Right? Just because someone is Jewish does not mean they are part of this network. In the same way that just because someone is Russian, they are not automatically in Vladimir Putin's network. Putin will obviously be the sovereign of his own network and will have all of his agents doing various things. Right? These are power-broking networks that control things that are real in some way. They might not necessarily be physical, as we'll get to in a second. They are real in some way, they control, and they are powerful, and they need people to be operated. And so they need trustworthy people, because remember, these people are dealing with huge amounts of money, massive, massive portfolios, and it would be very easy for these to be leaky, right? It'd be very easy for lots of money to just go missing, and it would be very difficult, I think, in many ways, for them to recoup major losses. It would require a huge amount of explaining, right? like, how is it that this ended up there? You would have to uncover a remarkable paper trail. So it's one of those things where they need people that can be relied upon, and this is a point that we'll come back to in a minute, because compromat, I suppose we call it, is one way of having people to be relied upon, but another way is sentimental and emotional investment. Now, the next, I think, this is probably the most important one, where Epstein just tells us who he represents. Right? Representation is an important concept, and it means making something that is otherwise absent present. So whenever Epstein is there, therefore is the Rothschilds and the international money network that they represent, that they are a part of, or that they may even control. I don't even know, right? But that's clearly where Epstein's money and power come from, and why he just talks so frivolously to most people. Now, one thing that's really interesting is he's not being frivolous with Peter Thiel. When he's talking to the Norwegian royal family or something like that, they act like supplicants, and he is some sort of potentate. He is a viceroy they're secure in their own position and could just talk like down to them as if they're peasants. But with Peter Thiel, as you can see, he is actually this is way more than he would normally write. Like, he is actually, and Thiel is the one being terse in this. So he recognizes that Thiel is probably the sovereign of another network that he is trying to interface with in order to get something done. He wants to meet him or wherever it is. And so you can see that there is these networks have virtual borders and boundaries, and they are constantly touching other networks, and they have to work together in some way, right? People understand that they have their own demesnes, however it's managed.
I just wanted to say, sorry about that yesterday. The guys on Kick, Twitch, and Rumble.
And other people have their own, and they have to interface in some way. And Epstein was one of the go-between guys. And the thing is, he's probably one of the best go-between guys, because he is just constantly being asked by various other people for favors and for help. And the thing is, for Epstein, it's worth him doing this, because it gets him credit later on that he can spend when he needs to. Anyway, the next thing is, frankly, Epstein's Jewish supremacy. Epstein was clearly a Jewish supremacist. And this, again, I just want to stress, is not something that I think is representative of most or any other people, but it is definitely representative of Epstein. And I think that this informs the way that he viewed the world. As you can see from this email to Roger Schenck in 2009, he says, quote, "This is the way the Jew make money and made a fortune in the past 10 years, selling short the shipping futures, let the
Dude.
Goyim deal in the real world." Now,
If any of us talked about these bastards like that, oh, this is how the Jew makes money, dude, we would be stripped of everything. But they say it in passing. It's nothing to them. It's a throwaway.
the thing here is we deal with things that are virtual, that are abstract. We as Jewish people don't dirty our hands in these things. And then he uses the word goyim, which is a derogatory term for non-Jewish people. It doesn't stipulate any one particular group. It just stipulates any group. In the same way that ancient Greeks would just call all foreigners barbarians.
It's incredible.
It's this kind of dismissive, although not individually so. It's not like a racial slur in the way that the N-word is, or something like that, stipulating a specific group. It is a generally disdainful and not unkind way of describing non-Jewish people. And what it reveals, and this is just one example, we have many other examples, of him using this term in order to suggest, and where he doesn't outright state, that he feels that non-Jewish people are somehow inferior to Jewish people. Now, like I said, this is not everyone, but this is the case with Epstein. Now, this actually is not a terribly surprising position for Middle Eastern religions, right? Epstein's very conscious of his Jewishness, and this informs what he is doing. And in fact, I think this also informs, like this particular and twisted interpretation is the same underlying motive as the Muslim rape gangs are, where when you have an interpretation of your own identity and religion in the same way that the Muslim rape gangs and Epstein's international list have, you literally devalue people who don't belong to your group. Now, like I said, this is not a universal interpretation from Islam or from Judaism. I'm not in any way suggesting that, but there are definitely really twisted and bad people who take their own doctrines, who take their own interpretation of these things, and come to these conclusions. And that's why we have this. I mean, it's honestly almost precisely the same kind of wording. I mean, this is from one of the rape gang trials. "We are the supreme race, not these white bastards." Now, that you can say is a bit more blunt than what Jeffrey Epstein has said, but you still have the same. And, you know, Islam has different words, in fact, for, what do they call us? Kafar. Right. So, as Epstein calls goyim, the rape gangs would call us kafar. And what this means is just the outgroup, just the other. And if you are this way inclined, you find yourself justified in abusing the women of the other. This is something that is very, very similar between these two people. And this is essentially the same phenomenon, just played out in different scopes. Because one of the main issues that we have, and one of the really difficult things, I think, especially the liberal order really, and the average centrist liberal person really is uncomfortable with dealing with, but is definitely true, is that one of the ways that these networks of power maintain trust and keep people on side is through ethnic solidarity. And so you have Islamic networks, you have Jewish networks, but you also have other networks that are based on ethnic solidarity. I mean, one of the ones that people have come to notice, oh my God, look at all these fucking hopefully keep that there. The Indian CEOs of tech companies. Indian nepotism has become something.
Yeah, that's a real problem because they favor their family members and stuff. And it's
that people have noticed.
It's ridiculous. I just seen England has its first ever female Archbishop of Canterbury. That's insane.
Because there are, of course, Indian power networks that rely upon familial ties and a shared ethnic component to establish and build trust within the network. Now, that's not to say you can't have people within the network who are not a part of that ethnic group. It's not categoric, it is relational, but part of the relation is built on a shared ethnicity, a shared religion, a shared understanding of the world, and that this builds a shared trust between certain people. And what this means is that we have to be aware of this. This is just the reality of what is already going on around us, whether you like it or not. And honestly, I don't like it. You know, I'm not a liberal, but I don't like this kind of raw ethnic preferencing. It does have a kind of grossness about it, especially the supremacist aspect. I don't like thinking of people outside of my in-group as being just, you know, inferior or anything like that. I don't think that way, but there are definitely people who do think that way. And some of these people are very powerful and are in position. I'm not saying Sundar Pichai, by the way, or whoever this is. Yeah, Sundar Pichai. I'm not saying him, actually. One thing that's interesting is the Indian networks seem to be based on preference rather than disparagement, right? I mean, although you can definitely find on Twitter that you get Indians who are disparaging. And so I don't want to say, again, I'm not even saying that all of the people in these networks, I mean, in Epstein's and, you know, the grooming gangs, yes, they're awful, obviously, but a lot of them will not think of what they're doing as wrong, and they will think that not forming this kind of ethnic network is itself wrong. And this is everywhere else other than the West, or at least for the native people of the West. Like these,
Yep.
Epstein's network is obviously supremely powerful and supremely important in the West, but it's not the only network that is.
And I seen Laura Loomer was dragging Tucker Carlson because he's in Qatar or whatever, and saying, "Oh, what happened to America first?" And I had to say, look, Jewish, and we suspect you of having dual allegiances. He is a white American. I know he is not going white America over. I don't know that about Laura Loomer, though. And that's an issue. So it sucks that there's a double standard, but there is, nonetheless.
Very powerful and very influential in the West. It's just a very major one. And so it's one of those things where this is just a very uncomfortable thing to have to talk about, a very uncomfortable thing to have to deal with, but it is very obviously real and influential. And again, it's not that any one of these networks is all powerful. They do have to still worry about the law, as Epstein found out because he went to jail over some of the things he did, but not for the underlying network work that he did. He went to jail for the sort of those really heinous crimes that came up, but not the other stuff. I mean, I don't even know necessarily if a lot of the other stuff he did was criminal, frankly, but it is disturbing to think that this is how the world works. And it's one of those things that we're just not comfortable with. Nobody in the media wants to talk about any of this because I don't think they know how to talk about this in a sensitive way or in an honest way. And so I think they're like, oh, right, Epstein, he was in contact with Putin, therefore he's a Russian asset. It's like, no. Like, Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was Robert Maxwell. Epstein was going out with her for a reason. He represents the Rothschilds. There's no doubt that Epstein would have been part of an Israeli network. Right? There's just no doubt about that. In the same way that any of the Indian CEOs are bound to be part of an Indian network. Rishi Sunak, part of an Indian network. He marries into an Indian tech family that are billionaires. This is not surprising. And so, where is it? There we go. So let's talk about the kind of people that we're dealing with. Right now, what I think we're dealing with here is the same kind of thing as Hunter Biden, frankly. Obviously, Joe Biden and the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, that sort of type, the Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer types, they're all part of a network as well. They're a power network in the United States. And Hunter Biden seems to have fulfilled the same kind of role as Jeffrey Epstein. Hunter Biden spent his time going around fixing deals, managing money, giving 10% to the big guy. Like, each of these networks is going to have their own norms and customs and whatnot. But what I find really interesting is that Hunter Biden and Jeffrey Epstein seem really similar in their character. They're both wacko degenerates who love partying, who love taking drugs, getting underage girls, and just prostitutes and whatnot, going wild. They are licentious and hedonistic, and they're also fixers. And I was thinking about this, like, right, okay, what is it about this personality type that makes them essentially good for this job? Because, I mean, Hunter Biden, we know all about this because he left his laptop at some repair shop in Delaware, right? And
that's kind of the thing I made the point last night that Epstein was very similar to Hunter Biden. And it's kind of crazy that both of these people's computers or emails were exposed. So we can make that comparison.